So my name's Councillor Hutton, and
Hello,
I've been
hi.
asked to chair this meeting, and with me
Yeah.
is Councillor Sweeney and Councillor Williams.
Okay.
And we are the three councillors that are adjudicating on this matter.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is I'm going to ask the licensing officer, Miss Stedman, to set out the issues, and then I'm going to ask you, Mr. Gaunt, and you, Miss Ainsley, to voice all your objections, and then I'm going to ask Mr. Cross, as the owner's representative, to respond to those objections, and then we will put you all in the waiting room, and the councillors with our legal advisor will go through all the evidence we've heard, and then we'll come back and our solicitor will read out the adjudication.
Okay.
So is that
Fine.
okay?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Chair,
fine.
if I can ask that we go through the electing of a chair and
Oh, sorry.
any interest. Yes, please.
Yeah. I've been formally asked to stand as chair, and Councillor Sweeney and Councillor Williams, will you affirm that, please?
I will do, Graham, yes.
Thank
I
you.
support that.
And we need to know, has anybody got any interests other than the owner of the shop, any material interests in this case?
No.
No. That's a negative, Ms. Pollard.
Thank you very much. Then I think it's
That's
over.
okay. Yeah. So over to you, Ms. Stedman, as our licensing officer. If you can set out, give us a context for why we're hearing this case, please.
Okay, so we have received an application from Talk Express with regard to a new premises license application. And in response to that application, we have received two representations with regard to public nuisance and prevention of crime and disorder, in particular the issues relating to litter and antisocial behaviour. And those have been found to be relevant to this matter, and therefore it is needed to come to the hearing today.
Okay.
So for the committee to decide whether to grant the application or whether to modify it or to refuse.
Okay. And if there had been
any matters relating to parking or anything to do with traffic is not a matter that we can consider today, which we have already advised, I believe. So, all right, thank you, Chair.
If there had been no objections, it would have just been a matter for the licensing officer. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
If there had been no objections, would it just have been a matter for the licensing staff?
Normally, if there had been no representations, then yes, it would have just been decided by our team.
Okay. So no interruptions, please, while somebody is speaking, and all questions must go through me as the chair. So I'm going to start with Mr. Gaunt, as you were the first person connected, and I'd like you to set out your objections from your viewpoint, please.
Okay. Since the previous owner has ceased trading, for the last 12 months, there has been no antisocial behaviour. There has been no alcohol bottles, tins strewn in the street on the green areas adjacent to Swan Close, Unity Way. There has been no people using driveways and the side of the buildings as public toilets. There has been very little through traffic from the estate up in Talk Pits. People walking then down Red Lion Close through the alleyway into the top of Swan Close to access the off licence. Because no alcohol has been sold from there, it's been like a breath of fresh air in this cul-de-sac, shall we say. Admittedly, the only access via a vehicle is off the A34, but you can access, pedestrian access, sorry, off the A34 and at the top of Swan Close. That's where the bulk of the issues are, by people coming from the estate, purchasing alcohol from that shop, sitting at the bottom, making a rowdy nuisance, and then when they've had enough there, leaving all the rubbish everywhere, walking back up the Swan Close, discarding whatever they've bought in people's gardens and in the road. On more than one occasion, when we had our dog, walking the dog, there's been broken glass, and I personally have collected 2 to 3 bags full of empty tin cans and bottles, whether it be wine, vodka or what have you. And it's just not, how can I say, it's just not acceptable for the elderly disabled residents of Swan Close. That's mainly my objection. Like I say, it's been like a breath of fresh air since there's been no alcohol sold for 12 months.
Mr. Gaunt, is that it? Is there anything else you want to say? Because this is your opportunity to say anything you want, but once I move on, you won't get another opportunity.
Okay. I understand the gentleman wishes to run a business. I personally have had a car damaged by use of a better word, yobs. Lucky I was mechanic by trade, so I managed to actually repair it myself. And I think the hours of selling alcohol from 6 in the morning till 11 o'clock at night, and then till 1 o'clock in the morning over the Christmas period, I think that's ridiculous. And especially now Boris has said pubs will be closing at 10 o'clock. I think it's irresponsible for an off license then to be serving alcohol, or you'd be able to go in to get alcohol when the pubs are closed, and you would just get a congregation of people then flaunting the law, and there'd be more than groups of 6, and it would just kick in the coronavirus again. I've no objection to him running a business there whatsoever, but I think there has to be a certain amount of leeway on the opening hours of selling alcohol. I personally have reviewed it with my wife, and I would suggest, if he wishes to sell alcohol, certainly no longer than 8 o'clock at night, because as he states, there are another 6 off licenses in the area, and why do we want 7? You know, greatest respect to the people who've signed in, you wouldn't like it if someone opened an establishment close to yourself and was selling alcohol till 11 o'clock and 1 o'clock in the morning. It's just not fair on the residents, and I'm sure you wouldn't like it if it was opened next to yourself.
Okay.
And I think I'll just calm down a bit now.
Right. Mrs. Ainsley, I'm calling you now. We'd like to hear from you. Hello, yes. Mrs. Ainsley.
Hello there. Yes, I mean, I obviously agree with everything that Mr. Gaunt has said. I was reading the representation yesterday that had been sent through by Melanie, and obviously it says on here that if the licence hadn't been surrendered, it would just have been transferred. But the original licence only actually did supply of alcohol from 9 till 9. So obviously that is very different to what this gentleman is now trying to do. 11 o'clock at night, from 6 in the morning till 11 at night, and opening for 2 more hours at Christmas, New Year. I just think that it's not even following what this representation says, whereby it would have just transferred to the fresh application. It's actually going against what has been said by the agent. It's obviously here because we have the premises details for the BL Food and Wine. That says Monday to Sunday 9 till 9, and that would be a much more acceptable level of selling alcohol in a shop. That is actually right in the middle. I know it said on here it's on the A34, it fronts the A34, but as you look up Swan Close on the right hand side, all those houses back onto it, and they have Thomas Street on behind them, Swan Close on the front. the people come from the shop, they either turn to go up Thomas Street and across the green, which is at the back of all these houses with elderly residents, or they walk up Swan Close. There's also another little estate just across the A34 with elderly people, and there's a little wall on there where they actually sit, and some of those elderly residents in the past have had to come out and clean up the glass before they can actually get their cars out. And I know that they've dismissed the Bath Pool and the Clough Hall incidents that I mentioned being 1.5 miles away, but that is literally across fields and down cut-throughs, 10 minutes. And obviously, if you're now going to bring alcohol further into Talk Pits and Talk, you could be bringing that in. There's a large green out there where lots of people congregate, literally off Thomas Street, Coalpit Hill, big triangle of council land, which previously people would sit there under the trees, drinking whatever it was, they were cider, Lambrini, cans and stuff, and just leave them. So I think 11 o'clock at night for elderly residents to have people walking up the street, drinking alcohol, and actually potentially urinating up behind the electric substation, which has happened in the past. I know it says on here there's been no nuisances, but I Googled yesterday, and actually when the other shop was opened, and I know Melanie will probably say that it's too late to put this through, there had been an antisocial behaviour incident actually in Hunters Close, which is just across the road, within the period of when Beer and Wine was open. And it's there, common knowledge on the internet. I just Googled, I can't remember, crime in your area, and it came up with, and it was only one incident, but it definitely was there. And obviously that would have been, the police would have been involved in that. And obviously that isn't direct to the shop. The also thing, the other thing I'd like to pick up is the thing about litter. He says he's going to go litter picking. I mean, that's, if he wants to go litter picking for all the cows he sells, that's an awful wide area where these people could be distributing that litter. And there is actually no litter bin outside that shop at the moment, not one. So nobody can come out the shop and put the litter in it as of today, because I've just driven past it to come home. There's no litter bin for anybody to use.
Okay, is that
So
it,
I'm
Mrs.
saying with
Ainsley?
Mr. Gorn, the actual period of time till 11 o'clock at night and 6 in the morning is what I'm disagreeing with. And I
Okay.
propose, as it was said on this agent's thing yesterday about 3 options, that you just reconsider. Second, modify the application. That's what I would like you to do, is modify the application, reduce the hours it's open, to limit the amount of time that alcohol is being bought from that shop and people are actually loitering in Swan Close. The first house, the first bungalow on the left-hand side has an elderly resident and a disabled daughter. And there's a lot of elderly people up this road, which it will affect. So I would like to go for the second consideration that is in the agent's documentation that we had yesterday, that is to modify the application and reduce the hours.
Okay, thank you very much, Mrs. Ainsley. I'm now going to ask Mr. Cross to respond to the objections from residents. Mr. Cross, the floor is yours. Nobody will interrupt you.
Thank you very much. I hope you've all seen the representation, and I'm going to go through it with some additional information.
Thank you.
So this application was submitted 28th of July 2020, and the consultation period was commenced. The legal notices were published in the local press and public notices were displayed at the premises. The consultation period ended on the 25th of August 2020. The shop has been previously licensed as an off-licence and convenience store for a number of years. The licence was surrendered by the previous licence holder on the 29th of May 2019, as is indicated in the report at 1.5. The shop has been closed and not trading for over 12 months. The applicant has taken over the shop and wanted to reopen the shop, providing the same service as previously allowed under the old licence. However, the previous licence was surrendered. The licence could not be transferred and a fresh new application was submitted. During the consultation period, there were no representations made by any responsible authorities or the licensing department, and the only representations received were the 2 listed in the report from the local residents. The objections from the local residents are based on two of the licensing objectives, being the prevention of crime and disorder and the prevention of public nuisance. Both cite an increase in littering and antisocial behaviour as the main reason for the objection to the application. In the report at 1.6, the officer states there is no historic evidence of complaints received by this department in relation to this premises. This would seem to show that the council have not received any complaints or reports regarding the premises during all the time that it was licensed, and there cannot have been any complaints about the premises in the previous 15 months whilst the premises have not been trading. There are no representations made by the police or other responsible authorities over this application, which again would indicate that there is no evidence that there have been any problems with the premises in the past. With regards to the objections from the councillors, from the residents, the licensing guidance and the Licensing Act say that any representations made by persons other than the responsible authorities have to have evidence based, which means that they have to provide evidence of these antisocial behaviour or littering. And in the thing it says you can support objections with a diary or a record of events or incidents, photos or video evidence, sound recordings, a record of complaints made to the authorities, and supporting statements from fellow neighbours or witnesses. None of the objections have got any evidence that there has been problems in the past. You can't use a crystal ball to say that there's potentially going to be an increase in antisocial behaviour or littering when there's been no evidence of that happening in the past. So that's the point. Both of the residents who have objections live in Swan Close, which is near to the shop, but not directly adjacent to the shop. And I go on to say that the premises is situated on Main A34, and the nearest residential property is situated around the corner away from the main road. The only access into and out of Swan Close for either vehicles or pedestrians is from the junctions of Swan Close and the A34. There is no pedestrian access routes into Swan Close from any other road. I accept that there is a small pathway at the side, which is at the end of Red Lion Close and leads out onto Chester Road. That's very narrow, and it's not identified on the plan, but you can see it if you go from a Google map. So there is access, but that is some considerable distance from the shop itself. Both objectors claim that if the shop is granted a licence, then there will be an increase in antisocial behaviour and littering in the area as a result. However, as I've said, there is no evidence to suggest that antisocial behaviour and littering have been issues in the area in the past, and there's certainly no evidence that granting a licence to the shop will lead to an increase in the problems in the area when there were no problems in the past. Both objectors also state there has been an increase in antisocial behaviour and problems in Bathpool Park and Clough Hall Park, and also in nearby Kids Grove. However, all these locations are more than half a mile from the premises, so to connect issues in these areas with a shop, which is a considerable distance away, is completely irrelevant. The shop has not been traded in the last 15 months, so any issues in these areas recently cannot be attributed to the premises. Included in my report is a further map showing the areas of Torque Pits, which shows the area, and this includes both Bathpool Park and Clough Hall Park. Kids Grove Town Centre is not shown on the map. In the report at section 3, it also gives the options to be considered, and these have been alluded to by the objectors already. The first is to grant the application, which is the option that the applicant would ask the council to consider the most appropriate. The second is to modify the application, or thirdly, to refuse the application. Refusing the application is not an option, and there is no evidence in the objections or the report which would support this course of action. The committee could consider amending the application to reduce the hours or add additional conditions to address the concerns of the residents. This is again an action that the applicant would hope the committee do not consider appropriate given the lack of evidence of any problems. In the licence application, which we submitted to the council, the applicant listed the steps that he intends to take to meet the licensing objectives. The application is attached as Appendix A, and the conditions attached to the application have been agreed by the police. These are similar to the conditions applied to all similar premises licensed within Newcastle. These conditions are deemed appropriate by the police at all the other premises within Newcastle, so these should be sufficient to provide reassurance to the committee that there will not be any issues at the premises should the licence be granted. Within the vicinity of Talk Express, there are 6 other convenience stores with premises licences allowing for the sale of alcohol. These premises are situated, there's one in Unity Way, which is across the A34 and is probably equidistant from the shop. There are 2 licensed premises situated in Talk Pits, which are the same distance from Swan Close as the Talk Express is. So, you know, that would say that those premises are in the vicinity of Swan Close. All these premises have licenses to supply alcohol until 2300 each day. And the opening times of all of them vary between 0600 and 0800 each day. There would be no reason to apply reduced hours to Talk Express when all the similar premises in the area have licenses which mirror the hours for Talk Express within the application. The applicant has reopened the shop with the intention of providing a small convenience store for the local community in passing trade. The premises have previously been licensed to supply alcohol, and the licence had been surrendered when the business ceased trading due to the shop having insufficient business to cover the costs. If the licence had not been surrendered, then the licence could have been transferred, and as there were no issues with the previous licence, then the transfer would have gone ahead. No consultation would have been necessary, and the objectors would then have had to ask for a review of the licence. And as there is no evidence of problems, then the review request would have to be rejected. We accept that the previous licence had hours that were reduced, but as this is a completely new application, we felt it right that the hours that were applied for mirrored all the other premises in the area. The applicant has taken a risk on opening the shop, given the fact that the shop ceased trading because of the lack of trade, and would ask that the committee consider this and the fact that there is no evidence in the objector's letters that would indicate that by granting the licence, this would lead to any antisocial behaviour or littering. The conditions that have been suggested for inclusion in the licence are more than sufficient to ensure that the premises will not be a cause for concern, and the applicant would ask that the council grant the licence.
Mr. Cross, just for the record, you mentioned when you were talking about all other licensed premises in Newcastle, you mentioned that the applicant is prepared to do a number of things, but you didn't list them. Would you like to list those things just for the record, please?
Yeah, the conditions that are on the licence application which is attached. Yeah, are on the pages under licensing objectives, and so the prevention of crime and disorder, the police have deemed it necessary to have CCTV which covers both the inside of the shop and the outside of the shop, which would therefore give them evidence of any antisocial behaviour in the area around the shop. The prevention of public nuisance, which is the thing about the littering, Notices to be displayed requesting patrons to disperse quietly from the premises. Regular checks by staff of the immediate area, outside area, to encourage patrons to conduct themselves in an orderly manner, and to encourage persons to use the litter bins and conduct a daily litter sweep. That's the conditions that have been applied to this licence and also to many other licences within Newcastle. I know that these are conditions that are applied by myself to the licence, but these are the same conditions that I've applied to many off licences in Newcastle and Stoke-on-Trent, and are accepted by the police as acceptable conditions in this, to cover those particular areas of concern.
Right, thank you, Mr. Cross. Is that it?
Yes, unless anybody's got any questions.
If I ask our host, I'm going to, sorry, Councillor Williams, can you unmute yourself, please? You're on mute.
Chair, it may be that the objectors have some questions, if you want to clarify that.
I'm giving the councillors first go.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, I haven't. I think everything has been explained from the objectors and the applicant. Thank you.
Councillor Sweeney.
Yeah, it's one for Mr. Cross, if I can. You say on your representation that there's half a dozen different places that open till 11 o'clock selling booze, and they open between 6 and 8 in the morning. Is that 6 and 8 o'clock in the morning, and they're licensed to sell alcohol from 6 o'clock and 8 o'clock in the morning, or the shops are just open at 6 and 8 o'clock in the morning?
From the records that I've obtained from the licensing service, the shops are Unity Way. They are open from 0700 to 23:30 hours. That's the opening time and the sale of alcohol. There's a Bargain Booze, which is down in the lower part of Talk, I think. That's licensed from 8 o'clock till 2300 hours. That's opening and supply of alcohol. Butt Lane shop is the same, 0800 to 2300. Opening hours and supply of alcohol. McCall's, which is in the High Street in Talk Pits, is 0600 to 2300. The Co-op in Cedar Avenue is 0600 to 2300, and the Premier, which is in the High Street in Talk, is the same, 0600 to 20.
Are these all licensed to sell alcohol that early?
Yes, they are. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
If you don't mind, Mr. Cross, I'm going to give the residents the chance to ask a question, not to go over what they've already said. So, Mr. Gaunt, do you have any questions that you'd like to put to Mr. Cross?
Yes, I think Mr. Cross is getting confused between Talk, Butt Lane, Kidsgrove and Talk Pits. The nearest one to Talk is the one which is in question at the moment, the Talk Express. The next closest one is down in Unity Way, which is a 5 to 7 minute walk away. If you were to walk into Talk Pits from here, it's a good 20 minutes plus, because it's all uphill, and then when you're walking back, it's quite a route. Butt Lane, you've got to walk to the Caldwell, then you've got to walk halfway down Butt Lane.
Mr. Gaunt, do you have a specific question, though?
No.
Okay. Mrs. Ainsley, do you have any specific questions for Mr. Cross?
Oh, yeah, I mean, it does say on here litter bins, but there are no litter bins outside the shop. So when is the litter bin being installed?
Thank you very much, Mrs. Ainsley. That's very clear. So I think we're finished hearing evidence. Ms. Pollard, as our solicitor, is there anything else we need to consider before we retire?
I think the question was to Mr. Cross, when is his applicant going to supply a litter bin outside his premises?
Mr. Cross, litter bins outside the premises.
Yeah, the litter bins can be put in as soon as the licence is deemed granted. I mean,
You've already offered to make a litter sweep once a day. Would you be prepared to increase that during the busy hours in the evening, say 2 or 3 sweeps? Would that be acceptable, Mr. Cross?
yeah, yes, that's perfectly acceptable. The only proviso that you would put on there is that how far do you extend the litter sweep? Is it just at the front of the shop? Because
Yes.
you can't associate litter that's deposited in Swan Close, if there is any, with what's come from the shop, unless. Well,
Mr. Cross, it would be just to be the immediate vicinity of the premises. So where you can see litter from your premises that's come from your premises, that would be deemed acceptable.
we accept that, and they will do regularly, whether it be once a day, twice a day, 3 times a day. Depends on how busy the shop is. And there will be litter bins. For information, there is also now a barber's shop adjacent to the next door, and they are also supplying a litter bin, so I believe.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is there anything else that we need to consider before we retire?
No, we're quite happy.
From the licensing officer, Miss Stedman, anything from you?
Sorry, Chair. No, there's nothing further from us. Thank you.
Okay, if I can ask our host to put Mr. Cross, Mr. Gaunt and Miss Ainsley into the waiting room, and we will retire and deliberate. Thank you. Okay, everybody. Thank you for that. We had to go through all the evidence, ask a few questions ourselves to clarify some things, and in particularly pick up the points that Mrs. Ainsley and Mr. Gaunt have made, and also the how Mr. Cross has represented his client in answering those things. And I'm going to ask our solicitor, which is our normal practice, to read out our deliberations, and then right at the end I'm going to add a further point which I hope will specifically for the 2 residents, Mrs. Ainsley and Mr. Gaunt. So if you all please, without interrupting, listen to our solicitor, Miss Pollard. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The committee have carefully considered the report, also the Licensing Act and the licensing guideline issued in respect of this application, as well as the representations from the applicant themselves and the objectors. The committee have been asked to consider the licensing objectives on the basis of crime and disorder and public nuisance. They noted that there has been no objections from Staffordshire Police or the Environmental Health, and they accept that no evidence has been submitted that can be attributed to these premises. Saying that, they accept the concerns of the residents and feel that the conditions proposed in the application form should be incorporated into the operating schedule, with the amendment to the littering condition that should say that a litter bin should be installed at the premises as soon as they begin operating, and that there should be three litter clearing rounds done at first thing in the morning, tea time-ish, and then before the premises close. These, like I say, will be incorporated into the operating schedule. This will be followed up in writing with the full reasons given. Over to you, Chair.
As Mr. Gaunt and Mrs. Ainsley, you'll appreciate that we have to operate within the legal guidelines. However, if things don't go to plan, and there is antisocial behaviour or increased littering, first of all, once you have evidence and you need to collect the evidence of that, photographic or whatever, you can then ask if it's litter, you can ask the environmental health to conduct a review. If it's ASB, please note every item of ASB, including the time, and if possible, evidence such as, be very careful about taking photographic evidence, but if you can get evidence, certainly note the time, and then you can take that to the police. And furthermore, if you are still unhappy, if residents are still unhappy, you can ask for either the council to undertake an independent review of the premises, or you can conduct your own, we believe, in now, but it must be evidence-based, and you can then bring that back to the licensing committee. So I'm hoping with that caveat at the end that you understand that you can come back in the future, and it's all down to the shop owner to show that he's listened very carefully to residents and taken your views into consideration. But we do note that he's already offered to provide litter picking and a litter bin, and we think 6 in the morning when he opens, cleaning up, that's to his advantage as well as yours. To round about 6 o'clock in the evening, which is a busy time for people using the shop, and at close of play, ought to take care of the extra litter, and that will also be to the shop owner's benefit, because clean and tidy shops and areas attract more business. So I'm hoping that you're all happy with what we've come up with, and that you can come back at a later date. Okay, that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Ainsley. Thank you, Mr. Gaunt, for giving your time up today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, host, if we can take people out and just leave the, if we can take the visitors out, please.